How's it going, everyone? Carpo here for another series of rambles. And it's this particular subject I found myself at a loss for words. I've been thinking for a couple of days on and off about this subject, and every time I've thought I'll sit down and make a video talking about it, I've realized that I come up short with any particular substance, or maybe it's not necessarily any substance so much as I just don't see any resolution. I guess the issue that I'm talking about here is the division in society, and this is where it gets confusing, because it's not the division of the haves and the have-nots. It's not the division of the blacks and the whites. It's not the division of men and women. Nor is it even the political divisions of conservative and democratic. It is the idea that there seems to be a division that is far-reaching and permeates all races, cultures, religions, persuasions. And that's that a lot of people are angry. And a lot of people have misplaced or misdirected hostility, where they're angry at the wrong people, or they're not informing themselves about where the real problems come from. For a quick example, one would be blaming the current state of the economy on immigrants, let's say, and claiming that they're taking our jobs and that that's why the economy is bad. Or that type of propaganda where we marginalize an entire culture, whether it be, a race or a religion, merely because of the actions of a few, when in fact the whole, let's say, take Islam for example, it's not a religion of angry people who want to see all the infidels die. That's just not the truth. But that's what a lot of people would have you believe, and a lot of the propaganda that drives people to hate is based on stirring up emotions about the state of the economy and the state of personal finances, and place blaming it on various other cultures. In other words, it's deflecting our problems onto other people. And it's called projection in psychology, and individual people do it all the time. It's always somebody else's fault. But when it comes to an entire culture doing it, or half of a nation, you start to see what division I'm talking about. And that's the division of those who have learned to handle themselves and those who have not. And I'm going to explain that as best I can here. We all grow up, at least most of us, with some sort of adversity. Whether we're picked on, or we have an issue with our growing up, whether we're poor or maybe we move around a lot. But most people grow up and they have something about their youth that they remember that was rough, that was a struggle. And the emotion that's tied with that, especially if a person grew up poor, that can be exploited by a politician saying, hey, the reason why you're poor is because this guy over here is taking welfare, or the reason you're poor is because this person over here is taking your job. Now, to the educated person, it's preposterous, but even an educated person who looks into the statistics and the actual facts and says, okay, well, immigrants are taking the jobs that whites won't do, let's say. For example, they tried to pass a bill, I think it was in Alabama, and where they wouldn't allow immigrants to work in the fields. And most of the stuff rotted because the whites were too slow at it. It just wasn't something, and it has nothing to do with race. It's their part of their culture. That's what they did. That's what those migrant workers did. It was their specialty. You can't just have somebody jump into that job and be as efficient for the same price. My point being that it becomes very confusing and very deep when it comes to financial issues in the economy. And money is being spent in all kinds of places, but tapping into that anger that people have about not having enough is something that is dividing our country among two extreme views opposing each other. And watching this happen from a distance, I'm able to see and understand both sides and where they're coming from, and how you can view it from many different standpoints. You can just say, screw all of it, I'm just going to live my life happily and do the best I can. That's sticking your head in the sand, because if you're going to live in the country with the laws, you want to be contributing to how those laws are made. But at the point people give in, because it's overwhelming and there's too much. And I don't blame people for that at all. On the other hand, a lot of folks seem to think that they're professional economists and they know everything about the economy, and they know exactly what it would take to repair it, and they know exactly what the financial issues are. But there's something that's forgotten. People. Sometimes fixing the nation may be much more complicated than just displacing people. Fixing the nation takes, at least the nation I live in, which was based on the acceptance and tolerance of all cultures, creeds, to assume that forcing anyone out of this country is going to solve our problems flies right in the face of what we stand for. And it will backfire severely. For example, deporting Mexicans, that's nothing new. We had Operation Wetback in the 1950s, and we deported a lot of Mexicans, and it turned into a nightmare, and it's kind of a scar on our country's history. It's like a shameful thing. But here's where I'm getting at. I think that the people today, many of the people who are angry at society and angry at the way things are going, they're being fooled because their anger is being misplaced. They don't know where to put it, and they haven't learned how to deal with that anger constructively. So they rally around particular candidates and shout their support, and you hear these angry touts about how it's always somebody else's fault. You notice how it's never our fault. We never got ourselves into the situation that we are at. And I'm not just talking politics here either. This video wasn't intended to be based on the current, political system. It's people in general. Because ultimately, 2 people, 3 people, 1 million people can argue about politics all day long. But at the end of the day, what really matters is your personal politics in your life. And that's why we get involved in politics, is so we can hope to ease a burden on our daily life and make it easier for all people. But the thing that's forgotten is all people. People with families. Mexicans aren't just immigrants, okay? They're people with families. And many of them are damn hard workers who have put a lot of time and effort into this country. And I found out when I was doing a little research that they do the work that the Americans wouldn't do, of course. They put Mexican migrant workers put over 50% of the food on our tables, as far as the fruits and vegetables. However, on top of that, it turns out that there's over $100 billion in unclaimed Social Security that has been paid for by undocumented workers, because the ones that are paid with a check are still forced to take Social Security, or maybe some of them are documented, or however the system works. It's there is Social Security paid in. So there's over $100 billion that these immigrants have put into our country that's just sitting there in a fund, waiting to be claimed, but they can't claim it because they're not citizens. Okay? These are the overlooked aspects. $100 billion is not just a drop in the hat. That's a lot of money. So when I learned that, I found, so the immigration obviously was never the problem to me. But if we step away from Mexican immigration and just look at the Islam issue here in America, trying to ban a religion goes against and flies in the face of everything that this country stands for. I mean, people are always quick to want to change the Constitution as long as it serves their purposes. And when it comes to preserving it, go hand in foot. Just try not to. Don't touch the paper. But the founding fathers themselves said that the Constitution needs to be updated and revised to move with the times of the people. Well, it hasn't been in a while. But there are certain things that will never be revised and should never be revised. One of them is the right to free speech. And I'm going to tell you one of the commandments, thou shalt not bear false witness. I'm not a Christian, but the Ten Commandments show to me the values that at the time they put on society. These were the things that were important. Coveting your neighbor's goods, eyeballing your neighbor's wife, but one of those was bearing false witness against thy neighbor. And this is exactly what certain candidates are doing in my country right now. They're running a smear campaign against people that are not to blame. There was a story I read about this Mexican the other day, a homeless guy who was beaten and left in the street and by a couple of younger guys. He was taken to the hospital with some broken ribs and whatnot, and when asked, he said he forgives the people. He says he just hopes that they can learn not to see hate. Turns out the guy's been here since the 80s. He's been working steadily, and he has put a ton of money into the economy here, and he still works, and he's homeless. Well, when the kids were caught and asked why they did that, they said, well, because one of their hero candidates said that these guys need to get out of the country, and they agree. And this is promoting hate in my country. When asked, that particular candidate, if he condoned the violence, his answer, well, my supporters are very passionate. That's not exactly a ticket to stop. That is, in my eyes, that's basically saying perpetuate the hate, keep it going. And this is what's happening. The people who are angry, who don't know how to handle themselves, are being pulled out and sucked into this whole whirlwind campaign. But the thing I wanted to make the biggest point about was that, how dare those people think that they're the only ones that are angry at the system? It's the very same reason that the left wing is voting for that other candidate who might not even make it, but one that is funded by the people. We're all sick of politics. We're all sick of the system the way it is. But blaming each other isn't the solution. Blaming your fellow countrymen isn't the solution. And trying to blame a religion within your country is definitely not the solution. But what I really wanted to say was that I am angry too. Everyone is angry. So don't pretend like your life's so bad, so you've got to promote hate. If you're that kind of person who thinks that hate is going to gain anything in your life, or that, judging an entire culture or race is going to get you anywhere, well, just look at history. You don't need to have any, financial statistics to see how treating people has ended badly. When we handle things badly and treat other cultures badly, it ends bad for everyone. America is no longer a country that can just build walls and isolate itself. This is a new world, and I think many people are afraid of change. And I'll tell you, as much as I hate to say it, the traditional white middle-class males are the ones who are most affected by this current atmosphere, because a lot of people feel like they're losing control. Men have always been the dominating white men, and that's changing. And people have to move with the times and change with that. If you want to keep up with the rest of the world, don't rely on your race or your wealth to do it. You have to use your head, educate yourself. And other countries are far exceeding the U.S. now in terms of self-sufficiency, energy consumption, and being able to move on with better and cleaner ways of living. And it's embarrassing. It's almost like, the guy who moves into his house in the neighborhood and fixes it up really nice because he's all excited to be in that house, and then just lets it go to complete shit, and the rest of the neighborhood has to look at it. And that's what America's going to be if we don't step up, shake each other's hand, and stop fighting. Instead of casting insults at each other, let's look at the real issue, which is that we're all pissed off. And we all want change. But hating people isn't going to bring about that change. Deporting people is not going to bring about that change. And I'm not going to, I shouldn't say people are are, I wouldn't say people are stupid or dumb because they feel that way. I just say that they're ignorant, and that's not a bad word. It just means they're ignoring the facts, and the facts are there for all of us to look at. And here's the one last thing I wanted to mention that bothers me. There's no excuse for ignorance in today's world. We live in a day and age where the internet's made every financial statement, government report, and statistic and encyclopedia readily available to each person. So when a person wakes up in the morning and they watch a couple of news clips about what happened the night before in politics, and then they go to their favorite blog and hear what people are saying, and that's the information that they're armed with, it doesn't bode well. It doesn't fare well at all for the intelligence or intellect of the person who's making decisions. We know the media is biased, and we know that you're only going to find what you're looking for if you know what to look for. So if you want to talk about healthcare costs versus military, go up and look up the information. Find out exactly how much we do spend, because it shocked me. If you want to know how much migration is really costing this country, look it up. You can find a lot of statistics about these things. And it's unfortunate that those that are armed with the most information often have the softest voice and withdraw and choose not to speak because they know that they'll be torn down by those who just want to scold and scream. And there's plenty of them out there. I feel like maybe, I'm going to avoid talking too bad about particular candidates. That's why I haven't mentioned any names in this video. We know who I'm talking about, but you could take this video and watch it 20 years from now, or 20 years in the past, and it could resonate the same way with whatever candidates are running in many different countries. Some of them play on fear, and some of them play on progress. Some of them think that the only progress is through keeping people scared so they can choose what to do. And I for one believe as an adult human American that I'm capable of making decisions for my community, but I don't expect to know everything about the entire country or the needs of the entire country. And a lot of people seem to think they do, and that's preposterous. Folks who say we need to get back to Christian values in this country. If you have Christian values, that's great, because lots of people always have through history. But this country was not founded on Christian values. That's a misconception. The Founding Fathers wanted freedom for all religion, and freedom for all people to come here, And so many of the people who talk bad about immigrants had grandfathers who came here that were immigrants as well, or great-grandfathers. My great-grandparents were immigrants from Scotland and from Germany. And most of us are immigrants from one place or another. America stands for something great, not something like, let's shut down our borders and just stop here. And buying into people's fear because of losing jobs, I'll tell you what happened in America and why we lost our jobs and why we're angry about it and what happened. We lost our values. We were producing some of the fine automobiles at the beginning. We were the first ones to produce these automobiles. But as soon as other people figured out that they can do it cheaper and more efficiently, then it changed the whole climate. And the U.S., rather than saying, okay, well, we have to make things cheaper in order to keep up, and we have to sacrifice a little bit, they said, well, we're just going to put embargoes and tariffs and whatnot on the rest of the countries and create NAFTA. Speaking of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, I'll tell you one thing that did. It allowed United States companies to sell wholesale corn at below wholesale prices and outmarket Mexican farmers who were producing corn. And at the time, that drove out many Mexican farmers out of business. So they were forced to migrate up here to work. And as well, much of California was owned by Mexico at one time until we